It's 10 a.m, so welcome to this meeting of the Scrutiny Commission. As usual, this meeting is being broadcast live to the public, and for those who are not able to watch live, the webcast will be recorded and made available for viewing on the County Council's website after the meeting. We've had apologies for Mr. Richardson and Mr. Gillard today, so welcome to Mr. Harrison and Mr. Hills, who are substituting for them today. Item 1 is minutes of the meeting that was held on the 29th of January 2024. I move that these are taken as read, confirmed and signed. Is that agreed? Okay, so item 2, question time. I've not received any questions from the public. Question 3, questions asked by members under standing orders. I've not received any such questions. Item 4, urgent items. I've no urgent items. Number 5, declarations of interest in respect of items on the agenda. Do any members have any other interests they wish to declare? No. Number 6, declarations of the party whip. Do any members wish to declare the party whip? No. Item 7, presentation of petitions under Standing Order 35. I've not received any petitions. So that moves us on to the first substantive item of the meeting, item 8, which is the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Strategy 2024 to 2028, which are on pages 90 to 38 of your paperwork. Leon Charikar, Policy Manager, will introduce this report, supported by Tom Purnell, the Assistant Chief Executive. Mrs. Posnett, the lead member for Community and Staff Relations, has also joined us today. Welcome, Mrs. Posnett. And so I'll hand over to Leon. Thank you. Want to sit at the front?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. I'm pleased to present the draft Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Strategy for 2024 to 28. This report seeks the views of the committee as part of the consultation on this strategy. Leicestershire County Council has a proud record of work in this area. The last resident survey in the autumn of 23 found that 93% of staff agree that Leicestershire is a place where people with diverse backgrounds get on well. 82% agree the council treats all types of people fairly. In the latest workforce survey, 92.5% agreed the council is committed to equality, diversity and inclusion. The council has made a commitment to become an anti-racist organisation, has become a menopause-friendly employer, and was rated the best performing local authority in England for LGBTQ+ employment equality. We are disability confident. We've also signed the British Sign Language Charter. The council operates in a changing and challenging international, national and local context, which does need to be acknowledged and reflected in the strategy. In the past 4 years, there have been significant movements for change, such as Black Lives Matters and the Me Too movements, the COVID pandemic, where older and disabled people were especially affected, and a swift move towards remote and digital ways of working and interacting. There have been some damning reports into institutional discrimination within the Metropolitan Police and other services, and a series of court cases and government announcements relating to this work. Locally, we're witnessing a changing population, older and more ethnically diverse, with new arrivals from overseas, as well as migration from Leicester City. Our staff profile broadly reflects the diversity of all communities we serve, with encouraging trends in the number of women and ethnic minority staff reaching senior grades. The strategy for 24 to 28 builds on these successes and this context and provides a structure based on 7 pillars. The first is clear and confident leadership, being robust in the face of challenge. The second is a diverse workforce and inclusive culture, which recognises and values diversity and the benefits it brings. Third, it talks about having robust data and an evidence base. The decisions we make are based on clear evidence of what works. Fourth is honest community engagement, working with our communities and ensuring that we have good and clear, transparent communications with them on these issues. Fifth, we need to have influential commercial arrangements and partnerships with suppliers, providers, and also partner agencies. Sixth, but perhaps also the most important one to me, is having accessible and fair services that actually do what they say and are accessible and fair to all our residents. And finally, the strategy talks about accreditation and recognition, celebrating our successes and demonstrating the level of the journey that we've been on. This consultation will seek to engage with residents, communities of interest, partner organisations, employee networks and staff. We'll aim to seek engagement and support for the broad strategy and also look to refine the priorities. We'll use several approaches, including face-to-face and virtual community meetings. We welcome the views of this committee and members in general on the strategy, and also any issues relating to equality of access to services or equality of employment that come to your attention. This is a draft strategy and it will change, and we're happy to take comments and build on that and include things like case studies going forward. Personally, I'm very proud to work for an organisation that values the benefits of diversity and demonstrates clear leadership when faced with particular incidences and challenges. The plan is to return to Cabinet in June with the findings from the consultation and seek endorsement for the strategy by full Council in July 24. Thank you.
Thank you, Leon, for the introduction. Tom, did you have anything you'd like to add, or Mrs. Posner at this moment before I hand over to the members of the panel? Oh, okay, so Mr. Barclay, I think.
Yeah, I think it's good. I mean, I appreciate that we're governed by legislation. It's really encouraging to see that 93% of the staff think that we are fair, equal, foster good relationship, eliminate discrimination. But at the heart of it, it really is just teaching people across the board, with no exception, with decency and consideration, and giving them the same opportunities. I mean, I read within the report of targets. Some of them, it's very difficult to get objective targets on this. It's mainly subjective. And if anybody is being discriminated against or feels they're not being treated fairly, I would have thought their first port of call is their line manager. I just worry that we're doing this, but are we almost doing it to the extent that it's getting to the stage we're nearly looking for problems and creating problems, whereas I think the majority of people, I know it's easy to say these things, but I think the majority of people do treat everybody, no matter what their characteristics, with decency, honesty and openness and fairness. It's just we're measuring targets. Objective target, very difficult to set, I think, very, very difficult because you can have all the targets you like in the world, but on a day-to-day basis, you need to treat your colleagues and everybody in the same manner with decency. And I know time is evolving and things are going on and society changes, but that's pretty much a golden rule that runs through the thread of everything. What would you say to that?
I think that's a really fair comment, and it's at the heart of what we're trying to do. It is about the culture, and culture is something that is hard to define. It's how you feel in the morning when you go to work. Do I want to go to work? Do I feel part of a team, part of an organisation? Do I feel I can be my authentic self at work as well? Many staff talk about the importance of being able to come to work and share who they are, all aspects of their identity, their family, their personal life, whatever that might be, and to feel that they can do that and they'll be accepted for who they are. And that runs across not just our organisation, but also the way we try to interact with the public as well, to accept people and those core decency, respect, honesty, fairness, I think, are the values we're trying to imbue through this strategy.
Thank you. Mr. Morgan.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, Leon. So I just want to ask a few questions about some of the on the objectives. So looking at page 27 of the report, set out 8 objectives for the strategy, and those sort of caught my eye on the basis of some of the language being used. So item 7 in particular talks about evidence-driven decision-making, evidence and data-driven decision-making again, comprehensive data sets. So I kept on reading that, and my background is I'm a researcher at Loughborough University, so I look at this from a research perspective of what would actually be considered to be a valid set of data. What is that data related to? And the evidence-driven really implies quite a high benchmark of data. So I'm interested to know what is that quantitative data? Is that qualitative data? What exactly are we actually looking at there?
Fair question. I think we're looking at both. We're looking at trying to make sure that we have good data on things like our staff profile and recording of the staff profile by ethnicity, by sexual orientation, disability, etc., and encouraging staff to report that. So we can then looking at the trends in terms of complaints or trends in terms of profile across the organisation and see how that improves. Equally, in terms of delivering of services, it's important that we are recognising our services meeting the needs of all our communities? Are they accessible to all? So recording data information and collecting information there, I think, is going to be really helpful. It is something that's part of the strategy, so it evolves and it's work in progress. But we wanted to stress that it's important that we make decisions based on the evidence that's coming through to us, rather than just on perceptions.
So as an objective, obviously that's linked back to the aim. So for instance, on that one where it's promoting evidence-driven decision-making, promote a culture of evidence and data-driven decision-making. I mean, that as a sentence is slightly, I'm not entirely sure whether that possibly needs a bit of work on redrafting, because there's a lot of decision-making and evidence crammed into one sentence. I suspect it probably means something a little bit cleaner. But what is it actually linked back to on aims in that case, that particular objective? Because you've got 4 aims, which one is that linked back to?
I think certainly what we can do is, because this is a draft strategy, we'll be looking to refine the language in it, which I think that's a fair point to clarify the difference between the aims and the objectives going forward. And it is, I think it's really linking to the aims of the commitment and the setting the priorities as well. So when we look at setting the priorities and where we need to go forward, that clearly needs to be based on our evidence of what we have in terms of our current performance, in terms of staffing, but also in terms of service delivery.
Yes, can I perhaps just come in? I think on objective 7, I agree that we could tighten the word in there, and I think actually what's said there applies to the council as a whole, actually, not just to the EDI strategy. And we're doing one of the corporate cross-cutting programs at the moment is around developing a data strategy, and I think it's that sort of principle that will underpin that work. I think the other evidence that's important as well is more qualitative information. So there's the community insight survey, but there's also that sort of insight we get from the workers groups and other intelligence that's gathered, within the organisation as well. And it's just making sure we take account of all of that when making decisions.
Okay, if I can carry on in that case. So I mean, it's good to hear. I mean, getting the aims absolutely clear, I think, is obviously critical, because the objectives will then follow from that, and the methodology that you use to then analyse the data that you're actually getting in can actually help then to supporting the objectives. Some of the data, again, clearly, the actual statistical benefit of the data. We've had this in other scrutiny meetings before, where very low data numbers actually create slightly artificial sort of points. So, for instance, just on a couple of points, one on demographics, on page 21, item 21, we quote 16% of the population have minority ethnic identity. This includes from Europe and those of African, Caribbean, South Asian heritage. I'm assuming this probably, because it's 21 figure, I'm assuming comes from the census. It then references back to this was only 6% in 2011. There's a sense check there. That's a 200% increase in the space of 10 years. That doesn't feel as if it's actually the equivalent figure. I appreciate this is probably from census data, just needing to make sure that we're actually comparing absolute like for like, because otherwise the data isn't solid data. The only other one I'd ask on the, making sure that where we're actually benchmarking against third-party organisations, that again they are, the quality of that benchmarking is robust. So, for instance, we obviously use the workforce LBTT plus as Stonewall. I have to say Stonewall doesn't cover very many councils. It covers a lot of third-party organisations, but it's probably barely 20-25% of all councils in the country. I think there aren't any other in Leicestershire. I think there's only one other, which is Nottingham City Council in the whole of the East Midlands. So it's again, how good, given our catchment area for workforce is a drive to area around Leicester. If actually it turns out that we're actually using a benchmark that actually literally doesn't apply to any of our workforce because there isn't another single employer signed up to it apart from Nottingham City Council, then actually using that as a benchmark for our employers carries some serious, well, why are we actually using that as a benchmark? Because actually it's not relevant to our employer base. If you're in a group of one, you're always going to be at the top of that group. So it's making sure that we actually get the right benchmark for what we're actually saying is actually our proving whether we've actually, and that comes back to the aims and objectives, making sure that we actually get the right benchmark for demonstrating that we are actually achieving. If we're looking for evidence, I would say using Stonewall as a bit of evidence is probably not great, given the fact that there's bugger all in the way of other organisations locally that would be relevant. So maybe there's another benchmark that we can actually use that carries a bit more weight. It's just that thoroughness, I think, actually, because it is absolutely important that we actually get this right. And I'd say actually diversity, I think, actually is also about educational background. I would love to see, an organisation actually looking at degree versus non-degree background, the background that people come from, whether we employ them, because actually diversity is really important to actually get a complete representative cross sample of who we actually represent and who we actually serve within the organisation, to get that whole sort of picture of our community within the 6,000 people that we actually employ here as the council is really important. And if we can get that balance right, then it means that actually our EDI approach has a huge weight and purpose behind it, that for the organisation as a whole then becomes credible, and it then actually becomes something that we can truly really drive as a sort of key, a key benefit of us as an organisation. So that's it.
Just come back on a couple of points there. Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Just in terms of your point about people with different educational backgrounds, for example, obviously the legal requirements around the protected characteristics, but we are mindful of other issues, if you like. And I think at the top of page 32, there's reference to other groups that aren't covered as protected characteristics, but which we are mindful of. And I think where we use data, benchmarking data, perhaps we just need to be a bit clearer about the context. So, for example, with the Stonewall, making it a little bit clearer, we're first out of this many councils, rather than just saying first, giving the impression that it's all councils that are included. So I think we can qualify that in that way.
Thank you, Tom. Mrs.
Thank you for bringing this forward. I think looking at this area is always incredibly important, particularly in terms of our workforce, but in terms of the population that we as councillors serve. So I've always valued EDI. It's something that, I'm involved with in my own working life. In terms of when you look across the data sets, one of the things I always will ask a question. I'll continue to ask question is about recruitment and onboarding and making sure that EDI is fully representative of those people who feel that they have a barrier to apply because they may have learning disabilities, or they might not have English as their first language. And also the engagement with onboarding tends to be with a laptop, whereas lots of people will use technology now with smartphones, and it's making sure that it's smartphone enabled. So I've really, it's actually looking at technology and how far people are away from utilising technology. I think one of the things that I was encouraged to see is obviously as councillors, we approved that people with care experience was part of our protected characteristic criteria, and that obviously has come through in the document. I think we could strengthen that actually, and I was wondering what, from the consultation, recognising that that has been come through council, maybe it is worthwhile that we've actually added in a protected characteristics more specifically to be looked at along with the other 9. And I suppose the element for me is looking at the data and understanding and ensuring that those individuals with protected characteristics, what are their specific barriers, and how do we, EDI isn't about treating everyone equally, it's about making sure there's a level playing field, and it's actually how do we create that level playing field. And are we comfortable and confident as an employer that we do that, but do we do that in a reflection of our services as well? Thank you.
Thank you very much for those questions. We had a conversation yesterday about the school patrol recruitment and people with learning disabilities struggling to access that because of the onboarding being all online. Thank you for bringing that to my attention, because I actually went back and spoke to colleagues in HR about it yesterday, and then I tried doing it myself. They said there is an option to get a paper form, so I tried completing it myself and I couldn't do it. So thank you for raising that to attention. We've spoken now and they've agreed now they're going to have a telephone helpline. It's going to be available. So it's a straight win. So again, that's kind of the value of coming to this meeting, because you will know things that I might not know, but we can then try to work within the organisation to put those right. So that's a really good thing to do. In terms of care leavers, yes, it's absolutely right that we've now adopted the proposal that care leavers should be a protected characteristic for our council, and we're setting up a task group. And my colleague Joshua, who's the equality officer at the back, he is going to be setting up a task group to see what that actually means in practice for our organisation. I think it's going to mean things in terms of data, collecting data, but also in terms of culture and how that we support care leavers as employees within our organisation. So I think it's a really good initiative. We're going to be looking to see how we take that forward across the whole organisation.
Thank you, Leon, and thank you for taking up that issue for Mrs. Hack and hopefully getting some resolution there. Mr. Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, overall, I think it's the most interesting report. There's lots of statistics in there. What caught my eye was the demographic workforce changes was quite significant. And the census of the residents at 20%, and this is old data 21. So one assumes that figure's probably grown even further. So we are evolving into a larger, older part of our society that it is really interesting. The other thing that I really smiled at was on 24, and this is July, so 23, so it's relatively quite close, is that 75% of the staff are female. So on your 6,000, that's 4,500 female staff. So there is a bias to the males. There's not much equality here, is there? When we're only left with 25%, we're really struggling. But anyway, so they're just comments on it. But I think overall, when you look at the ageing population again, because we talk about later on in our meeting technologies going forward. This was 21 as well, put at 148,000, and I'm sure that's grown now considerably, clicking into that age group. And it's something that I think we have to be mindful, because we very rarely hear anything about that. I also would like to comment on something that I spotted on the gents' toilet wall next to the leader's office, is a notice encouraging people, if they see any stickers or things put up. And I was really quite taken back when I read this. I thought, oh my goodness me, what's all this? Because we can be blinded by things as we go along. I mean, we talk about equality and recognising things. I've had this on for a number of years now, and I'm joined by a colleague over there. But there was quite a few at one stage when they all became available, but they seem to have disappeared a little bit. So it's walking that path and accepting how we behave. I think Tom opened up with a very good comment. If we treat everybody with respect, then we're going to have no problems, are we? And we don't really want policemen by tight regulation. We've got to allow it to organically move as well, that respect is the key to all of this. Anyway, thank you.
Isaac, if you want to come back to Mr. Harrison's comment. So I think the ageing population is a key factor for us as an authority to be aware of, and it influences all our services. So I think that's something that's going to be really key for us to think across the range of our services going forward. And as we highlight in the report as well, the issue about digitisation is something that we are moving towards. There are benefits for that in terms of efficiency for the council, ease of access for many people. You can access the council via your mobile phone, etc., at any time of day or night. But there are some potential disadvantages as well in terms of people being left behind. We need to make sure that we therefore do that carefully and have the equality implications at the heart of those sort of changes. We have a mainly female population staffing group because of areas such as social care and childcare primarily. But what's interesting is that actually when you look at the trends moving up within the organisation, I think it's a 68% of people at grade out of women. 68% of staff at grades 15 and above are women as well. So it's not just at the lower grades, it's actually permeating through all grades in the organisation. And that's something that's a trend that we're seeing for women and for ethnic minorities as well, which is to be welcomed. And finally, we have had some incidents. I'm not sure how much members are aware, but we have some incidents of stickers and graffiti in the toilets at County Hall. And that is really shocking that's happened in our organisation. And we have been very robust and clear in our response to that we will not tolerate that sort of hate crime within our organisation, and we will support staff who are affected by that. So yes, it's great, we all wear the lanyards and we all support it, and it's something we have to be vigilant about because it does affect our staff, but we've been very clear and robust in our response to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Leon. Did you want to come back, Mrs. Hack, and then Mr. Bowler?
Yeah, just to say thank you so much for taking the extra mile to seek out the onboarding programme. That means an awful lot to me, but I know that for people in Leicestershire who find that difficult, actually having the local authority take a lead is, I think, really, really important. And just on the hate incident, obviously as a member, I think it's really important that we do act really, really quickly and we're really robust. So the speed of the response to make sure those staff that might feel affected by that, it's it just goes to show that you live the culture, and that's why we have the strategy in place. So thank you for on both counts.
Give us a sec.
Thank you. When we do surveys for our staff, are they anonymous? And there's sort of a second part to that. Are they genuinely anonymous? And I'll explain what I mean by that. I used to work for the police for a good number of years in occupational health, as it happens. I was the only man, other than the doctors that worked there. I was the only person under the age of 30 or whatever I would have been at the time. And I had to do this anonymous survey on what I thought about the police. Tick which area you work in, occupational health. Tick your age, under 30. So suddenly my anonymous survey is the only version that could possibly be. Do you see what I mean? So do we, because obviously whilst people are going to be more honest if it is genuinely anonymous, rather than sort of saying, okay, in that circumstance, would I necessarily want to say that I'm bisexual or that my gender's different from birth if it can be identified easily back to me?
Yes, the Business Intelligence Service is very careful about that in terms of the staff survey. So when we break it down to different services and functions within the council, we only go down to sort of head of service level. So for example, in my area, the strategy and business intelligence service, I think it's probably around about 110 people altogether. We don't go below that. So when people are, that's a sufficiently large set that you wouldn't be able to identify somebody from within it, I think it's fair to say.
Thank you, Chairman. I think there's very little I can add because the other members have made very good points, but I'm also very proud of the respect culture we have at this council, and I think we are well ahead of the curve towards other councils. I just would like to reiterate a few points. I made the notes and members have already spoken about that. But my first point to reiterate, it is that I would also echo the point made earlier in regards of Stonewall. I mean, we need to revisit that benchmarking and our membership. I also think that the strategy should underpin the aims and the outcomes and the targets with actually robust data. Now, Councillor Hack was talking about the access, and I think that is a really, really important point. And I think it needs to be put into the culture that if somebody puts something on the internet and says, how does it work, that they actually go through the process as you did to see whether it actually works. And I think that has got to be integral in everything, because, I know how very many times I've been told, well, it's there, and then I've done it and I've looked stupid. So yes, I think that is really, really important. Now, we are talking, and we talked about age. I think age discrimination is quite substantial. And I think the strategy should reflect a little bit more on the young and the old, especially because, for instance, you refer to Black Lives Matters, but age discrimination was raised very highly in the McLeod cases, where it affected, where age had a huge effect and a huge outcome. So, and it made a lot of difference. So I think a little bit more should be emphasis spent to the old and the young. Now, we're talking about deprivation in here. One thing that wasn't mentioned is hidden deprivation, because in Leicestershire there are an awful lot of areas where there is unidentified hidden deprivation, and I think that might deserve a little mention. Now, another very short point is we're talking about the gypsy and travellers, but gypsies and travellers is actually a term that should include showmen and boat people, because that is how it's reflected in local plans and everywhere else. And now my other general point, it is, one more thing. I understand we have employed a champion for disability. Is that, or a champion? Councillor Posnett referred to a champion. Come back on that, Mrs.
It's for IT. But we were introducing a champion for IT. Yeah,
Okay.
That's
Yes. So maybe you know, we could have a champion that mirrors all of this. Now, right, so going on to, and I appreciate it is a draft strategy at this moment, but it's, as it lays in front of me, it is very page. It wants rejigging, it wants color, it wants pictures, it wants setting out a little bit better, and in my opinion, it wants references to targets, etc., which I said before, but it also wants pictures and case studies to make it more appealing, so it springs into, you know, your eye a little bit more. And I think that is all I've got to say on this. And I think it is really, really good work. And oh, one more question. Now, this is, how do members fit in this? How do you see members can engage in this? And is there a chance to maybe reflect that so members can have an input into the strategy? Thank you. Good work.
Thank you very much. There's a load of comments there. And I think it actually has reminded me to reflect. I think the key thing is how members can get involved. We do have a survey. It's on the website. So please complete the survey individually and encourage people within your areas to complete the survey too. You can also write to us directly at equality at leicestershire.com.uk or give me a ring. So really happy to.
Should that also then be reflected, all of these contacts in your strategy Indeed. As points, so when people look at that they know where to go?
Sure, indeed, that is there. If on the website it's clear, there are different ways of getting in contact with us. We'd really like to take the opportunity to engage with communities, communities of interest, communities with particular sector characteristics, or different areas across Leicestershire, to engage in that dialogue, partly about the strategy, but also just about what affects people's lives from an inequalities perspective. We've already had a really interesting meeting with people who are blind and partially sighted, which was facilitated through Vista, and that gave us lots of insight into daily living and daily challenges, some of which we were then able to take back and share with colleagues, for example, to do with issues around building of houses, highways design as key issues, transport and traffic issues, lots of concerns about electric cars, for example, and not being able to hear them when you're crossing the road. So those sort of issues are really good to gather through this process. It's partly about getting the strategy agreed, so we've got a direction of travel, but also about doing that community engagement, which is part of the strategy and really valuable to give us insight that actually does change particular services.
Thank you, Leon. Tom, Mrs. Posnett, do you have anything else to add?
I'd only just like to say that I consider the position I've got at County Council one of the best member jobs there is going, because I meet residents from all over Leicestershire, not just the residents I represent in Melton Mowbray. So I get an outlook into the way their lives are. And I think we've built up relationships, particularly with parish councils over this last few years. And I'm very fortunate to be invited by a lot of diverse populations to invite me to go along to see what happens perhaps in their religious ceremonies or how they spend their leisure time, and you know, I just consider that my job, in a way, is one of the most important jobs, because I meet so many people and I'm there as a representative of Leicestershire County Council, and the officers I work with don't just spout out the language they're spouting out. They live it, they are it. That's what they believe in, and that's how they do their lives. And so thank you for this morning. It's been interesting to hear your comments and the way that you've looked at things. But I'd just like to reassure that I work with a great group of people and I'm fortunate to have the job. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Posnett. Does any other member have any other questions, comments on this item? No, well, thank you, Leon and Tom and Mrs. Posnett, for presenting today and giving a detailed report and answering lots of questions. And thank you again. Cheers. This moves us on to item 9, which is Leicestershire County Council's customer programme and approach to automation. Jo Morrison, Head of Communications and Digital, is introducing this item. She is supported by Darabella Hadley, Head of Customer Service, and Kate Murphy, Change Lead within the Transformation Unit. Mr. Brecken, the lead member for Resources, is also in attendance, and Declan's here as well. So when you're ready, Jo, I think you're taking lead on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an early report on the progress that we're making on the customer programme, just as we start to shape our approach. The customer programme is one of the County Council's key cross-cutting programmes, so it goes across all departments. It has a current medium-term financial strategy target of 110,000 in 24-25, and that increases to 640,000 in 25-26, and we're confident that we're on target to achieve that. We're also going to talk briefly about automation and the potential for automation within the council. That's a relatively new concept, but we'll start to just introduce you to what we've been thinking. There are really two drivers for this programme. One is the worsening financial position for local authorities. All local authorities are looking at this, and also the changing customer behaviours and expectations. And we particularly saw that most acutely during the pandemic, how people wanted to change how they interacted with public services. So this is about getting it right for customers first time, so that we can achieve efficiencies and release that really valuable staff resource to work on more valuable tasks for our residents. So just in terms of the changes being underpinned and what's driving those changes, and there is a slide that covers this in a bit more detail, but I'm on item 6 now. This is really about leveraging digital channels for those that can use digital channels, for those that it's easiest to use, because there is a huge amount of appetite for that, but also ensuring that our services remain accessible for those that can't use them, and that people will be directed to and find it easiest to use the channel that's most relevant for them to meet their needs. That the size and the scale of the challenge is quite considerable for us. There are over 3,000 separate routes into council services. I'm talking web pages, phone numbers, email addresses, online forms, and over 400,000 external contacts, and that excludes the use of the website made each month. So a huge task, but also a huge opportunity to make a difference. I'm going to hand over to Katie, who's going to take you through some of the progress that we've made over the last 12 months or so. And there are some visuals to support some of the points that we're going to make, so you can see what kind of thing we've been working on.
Thanks, Jo. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me today. You're absolutely right, Jo. Over the last 12 months, we've been very much focused on targeting customer-facing services that have a link with our council front door or customer service centre at the moment. So sort of taking those particular services to see what we can do, trialling different approaches in terms of understanding the challenges and problems that exist, understanding the way in which customers interact with us, and understanding basically the opportunity that there is for making things as efficient as possible, both from a council perspective as well as from a customer perspective. all with the intention of making sure that our channels that are more costly are there for those that genuinely need to use those. So I've got a couple of examples here that I'll take you through. They all follow a very much kind of repeatable approach. What we've done before kind of going into any of our service areas is really understanding who is the customer that we're talking about here, who is it that's making that contact with us, and what do they need and want from that contact that they're trying to make with the council. So I've got 3 examples here. School admissions, you'll see from our diagnostic that the person that's making the contact isn't the person that requires the school place. So that's predominantly parents and carers wanting to make contact with us. The expectations in terms of that area is very much people want to be able to simply apply online in the most straightforward way, know exactly what they need to expect from the service and receive a decision that they are happy with at the end of that. Obviously, there is a small proportion of people that will always need that additional support and maybe making that application, and we will always make sure that that route is there for people. So it's not about removing that kind of accessible route for those. Blue badge, again, quite often it is the person themselves that wants the blue badge that is making contact, but also we know that quite a large proportion of people that are applying or making contact on behalf of someone. So we do need to make sure that the services we design support both those groups. It's not always the person themselves that requires the badge that's making that contact. And for adult social care, this is probably the most stark one really, but from understanding who's making that contact, we're finding that a huge proportion of people making that contact or referral are actually organisations and professionals, and that's where we are looking to sort of target and using that digital strategy to try and ensure that those more accessible routes around kind of telephony face-to-face are there for those that don't have those support networks or being referred through organisations. So the person themselves requiring support is just under 20% in terms of that contact. So this is all about our external customers. So not in terms of individual internal staff members trying to make contact between teams, but actually externally who is trying to engage with our services and how are they making that communication, and is that communication efficient and done in the most sort of suitable and timely way. So that's kind of just the logic. In order to understand that and also what people are actually trying to do with our services, we sort of take a multi approach really to that. So not only are we listening to calls, we're looking at the individual complaints that are coming in, we're looking at the feedback that people are putting on their individual online applications. We are putting user feedback on our web pages to make sure people are actually able to understand what content is on our website for those that can access online. And we're using the actual sort of the data, the quantitative information that's available to us to understand what's happening in terms of those contact against each of those channels. So I've got a couple of examples linked to all of that to show you kind of the impact of what we've been doing. If I just come on to the next slide, bear with me. So this is about one of our changes that we've kind of started to implement, and it's around call routing. So when someone does phone us, what happens to that call? The idea being that where someone is maybe stuck in a queue and waiting and on hold, or at risk of having their call missed, there is information that's provided on that telephony service to allow people to hear alternative options for getting the help they need. So if they are able to go online, it will tell you about the online offerings where, for the majority of the reasons why people are calling, those self-serve options are kind of publicised. So if you're waiting, you've got the option of receiving a text message that takes you to that relevant web page. So for example, school admissions, somebody wants you to apply to move school during the term time, we'll let them know that they can do that online. They don't have to wait to speak to an agent. But what I will say is that if someone isn't able to use that, they can choose to speak to an agent. So we'll show you kind of in terms of how that particular technology is working and the impact it's having. It's worth mentioning that when we've implemented these things, we aren't just looking at, okay, we'll make the changes to the call routing. We're making sure that the web pages are being assessed and reviewed to kind of match and mirror and make sure they are as easy to understand, digestible, the language is right, all those sort of things. And we have a range of ways in which we're testing the quality of those pages as well. And not to mention the process. So sometimes actually when we're looking at where we're sort of diverting people to, how is that process working? Is it working in the most efficient way? Are we, providing a service that enables someone to get to where they need to be as the best route possible, really, without it taking too much unnecessary time to get there. So diverting people to the right place first time wherever possible. For example, someone calls the adult social care line, they're actually already known to us, they're already being supported by an allocated worker. No point in them waiting to speak to an advisor who's then going to pass them on. Let's tell them about how they can make contact with their allocated worker without needing to wait and be on hold. So there is this sort of demand reduction that we're seeing in terms of customer contact, but that's predominantly linked to the fact that we've almost had this really high level of false demand, if you like, in our services. So people are contacting us repeatable times because either they didn't get through first time or they didn't get the answer they wanted. So this demand reduction isn't about saying, we don't want people to get in contact, but let's help people get the information they need first time without needing to repeatedly come back to us. Okay, so just we've got a couple of slides. They all look pretty similar, but they're kind of addressing a specific service group. So this one is around school admissions. You'll see it's a you won't be able to see the detail, but we can share these slides after. And what you see is a week-to-week kind of demonstration of the total net customer demand into Leicestershire County Council around school admissions. And this dates back to the start of last calendar year. You'll see that over that initial period where we sort of baselined it, there was a certain level of demand coming into the customer service centre and then also into the school admissions back office. So what we've done as a project is baselined what is that kind of total call demand and understood what sort of the impact of our changes have been. You'll see that when we get to this dotted telephony changes, that this sort of call demand starts to drop off. So yes, people are still calling and needing to speak to an agent, but not everybody needs to. So we've got 45% of callers selecting to speak to an agent still, or are choosing an option that requires them to speak to somebody in the back office. So if it's about a specific kind of, I've received this information about my application and I need something specific from an admissions officer, there is that option to speak to somebody in the back office. So getting them through to the right place first time. For the other proportions, that's 55%. Those people who rang us decided to be diverted online to information that would tell them what they needed to know about their about the school admissions service. So what we found over that period, so the main changes have taken place over the last 6 to 12 months, and as I mentioned, there has been sort of process and operational improvements in the back office, which has contributed considerably to this. So that shouldn't be forgotten in all of this. But as well as the web improvements and the telephony changes, there is a net sort of 70% reduction. The key thing to look at here is that you'll see on the secondary offer day, which we had recently, which is renowned for kind of being the highest kind of contact volume of the entire year. You'll see compared to the same day last year, that is less than a third this year, and that just shows you how smoothly the process went this year compared to last year. We haven't finished with our improvements, so we are on a journey and continue to measure and see what else we can do to refine, but that's just to kind of give you a flavour. With this reduction in demand, it's ensuring that we can have the advisors to hand and available to speak to those that do need to have a conversation with an advisor. And you'll see that call queue times, the time it's taking to wait to speak to someone, has come right down from an average of 21 minutes before down to just under 3 minutes. So that's the average. There will be occasions, depending on kind of peak times and when people are ringing, where it may still continue to take longer. And again, understanding those queue times and lengths is part of the project as well. This is just to give you an idea of the kind of the website review we did on school admissions, and also again to kind of demonstrate that it's under continuous review. So what we've got is this sort of hub style, more visual approach to the landing page for school admissions, where you've kind of got 8 of the kind of the key tiles to sort of help people navigate to the right page within the website. Each of those pages do have a help us to improve the page at the bottom. So if people do have specific views on their experience, whether that be the information was really hard to understand, it wasn't working, it's confusing, whatever it is, they can get in contact with us. And those kind of contacts at the moment are being trialled through the programme team inbox, where we monitor daily what's coming through. Since we went live with this this school admissions webpage and approach, which is about sort of 4 or 5 weeks ago now, we've had 3 pieces of feedback around that, and again the project team looks to resolve and improve where we can. it's a big task, as Joe mentioned. So we're sort of taking things in sort of logical, dedicated projects looking at specific service areas to address this. So the whole of the website isn't looking like this at the moment, I will say, and it's we are on that kind of continuous journey, and we know there's still a lot to improve in certain areas of the council. Blue badge, similar approach to school admissions, although we've done sort of there's quite a lot of work still to do there. But what we have seen since we went live with the telephony routing and some improvements to our website is again that reduction in calls compared to 12 months ago. So a similar sort of trend of 70% reduction. And just to reassure you that, yes, we've got 84% of people that are needing to make contact with us and apply for a blue badge. They are doing that online now, but we still do have a portion that do need help in completing those applications. And the phone lines are there very much for that particular offering. So we haven't taken away the telephone route for that. People can choose the option to have an appointment over the phone where the advisor completes the application for them. That's an approach we're testing within Blue Badge to see how effective or valuable it is for customers. And we'll see if that's something that's worth rolling out in other areas of kind of vulnerable customer groups that we're exploring. Adult social care. Again, as I mentioned at the beginning, we get a lot of contacts through from professionals or family, friends and neighbours. And so when we've gone live with the cool changes, that the reduction has been less stark. So there's other things we do need to look at in terms of what this does. But we have found that 40% of people are choosing to speak to an advisor or go through to the back office, but 60% are finding that the information that's provided on that telephony route is helping them to go online. And the main focus there is on the telephony route. We have very much split the messaging between if you're a member of the public versus a professional, and then we sort of tailor those channels and routes with the intention of kind of diverting professionals online. In all of our telephony, messaging and rerouting, if the call is urgent, we very much are encouraging them to stay on the line. We don't want people to be going online where it's an urgent situation that puts someone in danger. So just wanted to kind of reiterate that as well. Again, the call queue times have come down, but they aren't within the target that we want for adult social care yet. It is a mammoth task, and the project is continuously looking at ways to improve that. We know that we could essentially kind of up the number of staff in the front door, but we also get a big attrition rate in that front door. So there's something more kind of fundamental about that front door model for adult social care that is being explored, and options will be brought back to kind of council to consider around that front door to adult social care. But again, a repetitive sort of approach to making a step in the right direction. I think that's about it. I think high level, it's worth noting that in terms of our timescales, we're sort of hoping to spend the next 12 to 13 months in really understanding from the projects that we've delivered what that might mean for a future model for customer contact across the organisation. We want this approach to be rolled out across areas that aren't just currently within the customer service centre or adult social care front door. So there are a raft of front-facing services that don't have that centralised approach, but there is a lot of good knowledge and understanding and learning coming out of the project that would be beneficial to wider council services. So the idea being that future model is designed across with stakeholders across the council, with the intention of a new model being landed on over the next 12 months and then implemented, so that kind of spread and reach and learning around what that model looks like will be available to wider council services. So I think that could be anything from registration services to some of our kind of smaller services around child entertainment licenses and things like that. So it's a raft of things of different sort of scales, but we are looking at the moment at the biggest contact hitting areas. I think that's everything.
I'll just come back in to cover automation. Over the last 12 months, we've been trialling some of the technology just to see how automation could be applied in council services. And we've particularly worked with adult social care to prove some of the concepts. So in the report at point 26, you can see we've been trialling it on a number of things. First of all, processing some of the inbound post. So this would have been traditionally manually handled. It would have been a piece of paper that came in, it would have been looked at, or an email that came in, and then it would have been manually matched attached to a record in our adult social care system. We have seen that we've been able to automate 94% of those transactions. We have kicked out 6% because they either didn't match or they were too high risk to do that automation. But those exceptions can then be processed by a skilled member of staff. We've also been matching incident reports in the same way, and you can see some of the effectiveness in that there. One thing is that the bots run 24/7, so you can just process things through the night and we can pick up workloads in the morning. And financial assessments have also been run in the same way, and I think you can see by the slide the things that have been successful, and they are the vast majority. So the automation work is really about getting information to the right place quicker and freeing up staff to work on more valuable tasks. That really gives you an overview of some of the early progress made on the customer programme, and we'd welcome your thoughts and questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Joe and Katie. Before I open it up to members, does Mr. Brecken have anything to say?
I'll come in at the end. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Looking at a previous item, there was some old research that was described as 20% in 21 of the adult retirement age growth, and now I'm informed it's one of the fastest growing plus 65 growth in the country as a shire, as a county. So that causes me concern, because I have a lot of history through dealing with casework and dealing with people who ring and try to contact. Now, I myself's been on the phone for 45 minutes and just put the phone down. So I've gone through the screening, which district this is at, are you representing this person, are you doing, you know, and you're talking to people probably 60s and 70s trying to cope with all of this. It's just really ridiculous. And I'm really, really concerned with the idea of bringing in automation, because I know that it's going to hit lots of people. And once it starts, your figures will drop dramatically because people will be just utterly frustrated. So I deal with district councillors who complain vigorously we can't contact them, parish councils, clerks. In fact, to deputy director, assistant director, probably a couple of years ago, I suggested having a number for parish council clerks. There's, 200 parishes in Leicestershire and town councils. That didn't seem to work. And that was really, I thought, key ways in which you can do things. So the early looking at it, I'm just thinking, well, hang on, we have got a growing population. There is a history I could tell you about schools, applications, and it's just unbelievable, some of the stuff. One person was told, no, we've never received it. He's a priest, and his bishop from Nottingham had actually sent in a letter, said, do you want us to get another copy of that letter? I've had somebody who applied, then was told to apply again when she checked what had happened. She did, and then the third time she came here, and nobody would see her, but they'd only speak to her on a phone. And the lady said, I remember that case. So there's a lot of stuff going on, and it's only because, and I say it all the time, and I know officers sort of look down and the other way, never happened when we were here working full time. We had total access as members. I could walk into any of the departments, and some of the big ones had their own receptionists there. You chat to people, you got answers for the public. At the moment, the public are really under massive pressure, because they have not got the abilities or the patience to be able to wait and queue and miss. So of course you'll get calls and then they'll drop off and all sorts. It's not because they're satisfied, it's because they're expressing thoughts in a different way, but it's not very good. So I just want you to understand that there is a big problem there, and, you know, just sort of putting in a bit of smart intelligence might not be the answer. Remember, we rely on contact, and this is where I think we're all a bit disjointed as civil servants who are employed to serve us. We're elected to serve the public. So that's the chain of command, if you like. And I just feel that, you know, we're not really involved in this, because when I look at what's going ahead and what you're already investing, and I notice that fuel costs suddenly jumped up. So I guess people are going out and about checking all this new idea and visiting and doing all sorts. I get all that. But when I look at the page 9 and I see 110,000, 24, 25 increase in tuna, I don't know whether that includes that number as well, or is that a fresh number, against 560 million budget. So my first thought is, what on earth are we doing? You know, because when I look at the first year's saving, I dare say that might not even cover the staff costs for all that time and effort going in. So there's the deployment of your costs and energies and everything else. So when you look at the second year, and remember, these are snapshots, ideas, you're thinking, well, are we going to do it? 640, nice little bit of money, won't affect the MTFs in much, will it, really dramatically, when we're looking at that sort of volume of money in, to be able to think, where are we going with that? So I think the keys that I understand in government is a balanced budget, value for money. And I'm just wondering about the criteria. This does concern me. There's a lot of information here about self-service options, reduce reliance on human response, you know, and then again, reduce customer contact. You know, so I'm sitting back and thinking, well, hang on, pre-pandemic, people could contact freely and easily. We could walk around and talk to staff easily. Yesterday, I was following up a problem I've got, and an officer was dealing with it. Yeah, definitely, we'll check on it, he's available. Oh, he's not online. Magic words, not online. So, you know, there is serious difficulties. So a bit of sort of this and that. I want to be supportive. I'm a big supporter of this county council, but I'm just feeling really, really concerned over this, how it's going. Have we really thought what we're doing? And I always ask the officers, why aren't we all back at work? We're back at work, lots of people are, but why aren't we as a council back at work? Because it's going to create more problems. I mean, I digress a little bit at this point, but I mean, I can remember 2 years plus saying to a director that you will have mental health problems. When you think there's 75% of our staff are female, and they're at home in the smallest room in the house trying to do that. And I just feel that it's not good for health. People need to be able to comment and talk. And that's what you had in your groups when you came into work, in your departments. There was a social side. And you knew your friends and birthdays and everything else. Now it's a different format. So anyway, looking at what you're trying to do and achieve, obviously, when you're talking of 94%, 6% require human involvement. And I just think, well, you know, I'm just absolutely amazed.
Bring it to a specific question, Mr. Harrison, thanks.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, appreciate it. I'm sorry, but there is a lot to download and I can't just make one quick comment. So I'm concerned and I want massive reassurances that this is going to be working well, because, you know, you're going to be at 96%, so you're only left with 6% of contact. And I'm just really concerned because we're not serving the public and they're the one who pay the bills and do everything. How can we move forward with something where we're alienating them? And that's my question, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your patience. Thank you.
Could I just come back on your concern around channels and availability of channels? I don't know whether we can get it back up, but that first slide that I discussed, which has almost got that ladder of channels that people can use, that shows you the range of channels that will remain available for all of our residents. This programme isn't about turning off any phone lines or shutting any face-to-face channels. Those will always be available for the vulnerable and the people that really need those channels, and the people that can't access for whatever reason digital channels. The 96% question that you had, I would also be concerned if we were saying we're going to automate 96% of all transactions with the council, because that is not the organisation that we want to be. I think you are right. We are a connected organisation that delivers services for people. But what we do want to do is drive out wasteful manual processes that aren't really fit for the modern organisation that we need to be. And that test that we've done around the adult social care is just applying some technology to a single process that has a lot of wasteful manual effort involved. And that means that that person who would have processed that in their time can then devote their time to a more valuable conversation, which may actually be a face-to-face conversation or a phone conversation with somebody who really needs help. So that's where we're trying to target the effort, to drive out the waste in the system and prioritise the face-to-face and the telephone contact for those who need it most. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Poland. For me, automation and sort of going along this route has an awful lot of benefits. I understand Councillor Harrison's concerns about sort of the vulnerable people and those that are sort of more digitally challenged, and that absolutely is a vital point to have. But increasingly, this is the modern world that we're going into. I don't think COVID caused these things, but it accelerated it in quite a significant way to now where expectation is that you be able to access services online and in a whole range of different ways. And certainly someone that works, during office hours, often for people like myself, it's easier to be able to access on things. I can come home at the end of the day and I don't have to then wait till the next day to get a response and so forth. So there's a lot of positives there. There's an extraordinarily large number of ways in. I think sometimes too much can be less, if you like. If you then end up having to go on the website and search a million different pages to sort of access that. So variety is important, but let's sort of limit them in the sense that people can easily access them and easily find them online. And in regards to that, have we thought about going along sort of an app route and being able to people be able to get something on their phone and access services through that route? I know some councils have. I think from the top of my head, Glasgow might have done that route, and I think others as well. Again, that seems to be sort of the modern way, and people can just do it in their own time, in a way that suits them. In regard to sort of then how people would be willing to go online, I've explained that obviously a lot of people would prefer it that way, but I know a concern that a lot of people have, and I've had numerous times myself, is expectation of response. So is it the case that if I phone up a line, I'll get an answer here and now? If I then get redirected onto the internet, it will end up in an ether somewhere and I might never get a response. So I think that's a concern that some people have, especially if it's a slightly more urgent sort of thing. So when we go online, do we always give customers a response so that they know it's been received and been dealt with? And if so, do we give them an expectation of time for the response? So again, I know that I'm likely to receive something in a week, 2 weeks, whatever it might be. And conversely, actually, then, do we do the same thing on the phone? So is it the case that actually if I sit it out on the phone, I'm going to save myself 2 weeks in waiting time? Is that the case, or could that be perceived to be the case? So yeah, as I say, in general, I think this is the future. It's not the way the whole world is going, and we need to be, move along with that. But it's just making sure that people that can't access the system are able to access the system, and those that do access the system on a disadvantage compared to those that just decide to wait it out on the phone.
Thank you, Mr. Poland. I'll just cover your point about the app. So an app is something that we've looked at, and we keep under review actually. One of the things, again, there's some fors and against. One of the things is that they can be quite costly to develop and to keep updated because the technology moves on so quickly. So a few years ago, we took the decision to invest in the mobile optimization of our website. So our website is actually built for mobiles first, which means it downloads really quickly. If it's not cluttered with text, it's really easy to use. But an app isn't off the table, and I think that technology is moving on. The only other thing to consider when thinking about a council app is that most people, like the majority of our residents, only interact with the council on a very irregular basis. So they might report a pothole, for example, and they might only do that once every 4 years. So the idea that they have something that's sitting on their phone potentially clogging up their data, it just needs thinking through. But for some segments of our population, people that are high users of our service that need regular contacts, then yeah, an app is something that we may look into. In terms of response times and whether the digital channel disadvantages people, I would say generally our approach is to make the digital channel the more efficient channel for customers, for residents. And perhaps Arabella's got some more insight into how we respond to people when they have come through a form, for example, or on the phone.
Thanks, Jo. So with inquiries that we get into the customer service centre and other online services, so for high-wage users that want to report an issue, there are automatic acknowledgements. So we let people know straight away that we've got your inquiry. In most cases, those will have some SLAs, so we'll tell people we'll get back to you within 2 working days or whatever that may be. In a lot of cases, depending on the inquiry, will depend on the response that residents receive. When they're calling us on the phone, similar kind of conversation. So if it's an inquiry that we can resolve there and then, of course, we'll do that. If we can't, and we maybe need to go to a different department to get some information, then we will do that, and we'll kind of let the caller know what we're doing and how long that's likely to take. And that will be that either we will go back with a full response, or the officer that we've passed it on to will then respond from thereafter, depending on the inquiry. But that's generally, yes, always the case.
Thank you, Mr. Frisby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, officers. Can I just propose, is there argument to suggest your feedback and data that looks so favourable is because it's actually harvested through the same portals and bots that the digital users can use anyway? My concern echoes my colleague, Councillor Harrison. What about the digitally excluded? Is that included in your data analysis there? I mean, anecdotally, my mother is still using a Nokia 2110 or whatever it is, and will never move on to a smartphone. Are we taking into consideration her customer satisfaction? I also agree with Mr. Harrison in respect of my role as an elected member is actually dealing with the public as people. I believe that's the lifeblood of our role, really, that we actually see people and we listen to people. So my concern really is the favourable data that you're presenting harvested because somebody knows how to use that digital interface? And are we excluding a whole swathe of people who are not even online? Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, officers.
Thank you. Katie, I'm going to bring you in, but my overall answer is that the data that you've seen in some of the graphs that we've shown also includes call volumes from the customer service centre. So in general, no, but Katie might want to add some detail. What, Arabella?
Yeah, sorry. I can just add as well, in terms of that feedback, what's included is the call listening. So we listen to a great deal of calls, which is feedback in the moment, essentially, from people that are contacting us. We have regular workshops with our advisors, and they are the people that hear and listen to residents all day long. And it's important that we do get the feedback directly and that we put steps in place to improve that. In terms of our contact form, we have a feedback mechanism so people can tell us if the form is easy to use, if it wasn't, why wasn't it? And we have regular sessions in with the team to review that information and to put improvement steps in place. So that's all included within this feedback.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Mr. Hills.
Thank you, Chair. I think I look at this in a different way to my colleagues, it sounds like. So I think we have a real opportunity now to improve the service that we're offering to residents. And I think we're slightly discussing it in the wrong way, if I could say so. This may be the only opportunity we have in the County Council where we're doing this because we're driven by financial pressures, but actually we can improve the service that we're going to offer onto residents. I think we need to be careful not to confuse what you maybe could call HR matters or internal matters in the way the council is run with what our external facing offer is. So, for example, one of the councillors mentioned about officers coming into work and working from the office full time. Well, there's no reason we can't do that and implement these measures at the same time. And from what I'm hearing you say, if it improves the efficiency of the service and the staff that we have, well, they're going to have more free time, so they can then spend more time in the office to talk to residents and talk to councillors. So I don't see them being at odds with each other. I do have a few questions though that I'm hoping we just go back and forth on. I think we've covered already, that we do have an ageing population, and there are sections of the public who really rely on that kind of either face-to-face or phone interactions. So can you guarantee for every single one of these interactions, the improvements that we're suggesting will be additive? And by that I mean the process that we do right now will still, all of them will still stay in place. We're just looking at offering extra services on top of that to be more efficient.
I don't think I can guarantee that the processes will remain exactly the same because some of the processes aren't very good at the moment. So I think it would be a chance to review things end to end, think about the person that's interacting with services, what kind of access they have, what kind of needs they have, and if necessary, redesigning processes. But the access will always be there if it's needed. So the access to face-to-face, the access to telephones, or indeed any other technology that may come through in the future will be there because it will be deemed necessary. But some things really do need redesigning because they are wasteful and inefficient.
Okay, so I get what you're saying. Maybe it's the question, the way that I worded it, okay, some processes need to change, but I think the core of what we're trying to get across is, will there still always be that telephone link there if it was there existing already? Will there be the face-to-face link there for people that are, vulnerable and need that there? Is what we're trying to get across, I think.
I think if there were any broad proposals around turning off channels, so turning off telephone channels or face-to-face channels, that would need to have some really robust equalities impact assessments, and it would need to come back for further scrutiny and decision making. So as a whole, this programme isn't about turning off channels, and you've seen the channel strategy that I described right at the beginning. So yes, at this moment, I can guarantee that we are behind that channel strategy. That's our approach. But if there are individual services that we think, actually, no one's telephoned us about this service for 10 years, or nobody's used that email address for such a long time, can we decommission that as a channel because it's value for money and we can see some efficiencies? Then we would need to do some individual assessment of whether there's any equalities impact or any other impact.
Okay, I wouldn't say it's worrying, but like I say, I guess it's on a case-by-case basis, and I think all members would appreciate it if it could come back to scrutiny if you are going to make significant changes to those sorts of things where residents won't have the access that they would have had done before. I think that's fair to say. But I'll move on, so I think we've got the point across there. You mentioned, and sorry if I missed this, but for example, the Blue Badge initiative, we've seen a big reduction in the calls that are coming through. What has been the feedback from residents? Like, have the complaints around those badges gone down?
Hi. To give you an indication of complaints, we've probably received 5 since the beginning of this calendar year related, or comments are related specifically about access. I think 2 of those were related specifically to Blue Badge. That's on a kind of ratio of dealing with about 15,000 contacts in total. So it's a very, very, I think 0.03% of that contact. To pull up a note that we said earlier about the Blue Badge and about access, we've been trialling different things with Blue Badge in terms of enabling those that need kind of very specific help with completing an application. We have an appointment system in place now, which is seemingly going really well. What we do now differently is to what we did before, was dedicate some time for people. Our advisors will call them at a time that's suitable for them, and we will go through that application with them over the phone and complete it for them. So we're not distracted with other things. We haven't got, that time is dedicated to those individuals. What we see is for everyone that selects to speak to an advisor to book an appointment, generally there's about a quarter of those that then don't go on to have the appointment, because we've maybe provided sufficient information that enables them to go and do it online. And generally, if they want to, that's the feedback that we're getting. And again, when I talked about call listening, that was a big area that we spent a lot of time doing that with an advisor workshops to really understand what is it people are saying now that we've made some of those changes. But on the whole, they've been quite positive. And where we need to address issues, we are taking those on board and making tweaks or changes.
And then I've got 2 points just in general. Now, when I interact with the council, I mainly do it through the members' CSE inbox. So I appreciate, it's probably a slightly special circumstance, and most people, well, obviously the vast majority of people will not use that inbox at all. So correct me if things are different for the public. But there's 2 thoughts that I had as well in general. I think the CSE team are very good at getting back to you quite quickly, saying, okay, we've logged this, thank you for your inquiry. They're always very polite and respectful. But then sometimes, I think James used the word ether, sometimes it just goes off into ether, and they'll say, we've logged it with an officer on highways. I don't always get a reference code, and we have lots of different things that we're trying to keep on top of as councillors, and all of a sudden the resident comes back to me 6 weeks later and says, well, has that been sorted then? I think, oh, do you know what? I've got to follow it up now again. And I come back to the inbox and they say, okay, I'll chase it again. And you see what I mean? It just seems to go nowhere a lot of the time. So is focus being placed to make sure that we are following up? Because I know if you do it online, yes, it's probably better at keeping a list of all these interactions, but are we following up? And then my second point, slightly linked to that, is there a way of updating the residents, say monthly, on where their complaint or their interaction or whatever it may be is? I want to use an example. I work as a dentist for my day job, and I had a patient a couple of days ago who said something really interesting to me, and he had a little swelling on his cheek, and I referred him to the hospital to get it investigated, and it's non-suspicious, but it's going to take about a year to 18 months to be seen by oral medicine. And he goes, I said, oh, I'm sorry it's so long. The NHS, we've got long waiting times right now. And he goes, oh, I actually don't really mind, to be honest, because every month they're trying a new thing. They said every month I get an email to say I'm still on the waiting list. It's going to be roughly 12 months. If it's settled down and it's gone, then I can cancel my referral. And he was fine with it, But if I'd referred to him and 12 months later he hadn't heard Jack, and he says to me, well, Ross, what's happening with my referral? And then I've got to phone at the hospital. See what I mean? It's that regular monitoring that patients know, or residents, I should say, in this situation, know where they are in the system. They seem to be a lot more accommodating and don't mind, and then it relieves a bit of the pressure on the county council. So is there the scope for sort of regular updates saying, we've still got your complaint, we're still, or whatever it is, interaction, we're still dealing with it. This is the approximate time frame.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. Communication is really key, and that definitely from doing a lot of this work, we've found there are areas of opportunity for that, and that's something that we need to really continue to work on. With reference to the inquiries that come into the members' inbox, a lot of the time they are passed on to other officers within the council, and we are reliant on those officers coming back with the relevant detail, etc. So that's something I can pick up with colleagues in other areas to see how we can make that better in terms of making sure, even if we don't have an update, to say they're still looking into this, and again, going back to that communication being key. I can certainly take that away. There are just kind of on that point in terms of specific inboxes, there is a dedicated members telephone line as well that's still in place. And there is also a parishes inbox, so parishes have access to a dedicated inbox as well. And we, you know, they are being used. I think on average we have about probably 50 inquiries a week from members and about 40 from parishes. We'll look to make sure that those responses or those follow-ups are being actioned, and see how we can work with other teams to make sure that we are getting that information back. And sometimes we don't get the information because it's not available or whatever, but some kind of follow-up, absolutely.
You have customers.
Can I go to? Sorry, just to kind of from a program perspective, I think the point you pointed out is absolutely right, and it's something we're finding. If you kind of look at any kind of thing that the customer's trying to do, we need to be looking at it end to end, not just how do we solve it in the CSC at that front bit. So it's a huge mammoth undertaking, because we're talking, you know, if you're talking in highways, you know, we might have 400 different kind of processes we're trying to do. So we acknowledge that it's not where it needs to be in terms of kind of that end-to-end communication, the auto acknowledgements, and that needs to feature in all of our kind of process reviews that we work through. So it is absolutely part of the methodology of the customer framework. Obviously, Darabella's coming from the CSC perspective specifically, and it's definitely kind of outside her control at the moment to influence how other kind of officers are engaging with the process, but it is definitely the role of the programme to look beyond just siloed teams. So I just wanted to reassure you in terms of that, but notwithstanding, it's going to be a challenge to get it right.
Okay, and then one last point, and it's not a question, just a bit of feedback, because we do get highways reports, I think it's once a month, saying, you know, these are things you've reported, but it's not quite complete, because if you read the top bit, it'll say things like, if you've reported a pothole through the website, this won't be shown here. You know, if you've contacted an officer directly, or you're working on a project with an officer, that won't be shown here. And it could overlap, you know, so there could be a flooding inquiry in the email that we get that's automated, but it's on the email because I've emailed it through CSC to begin with. But then if I've contacted that same officer separately about a flooding issue in a different village, that won't show up on the report. So the reports are useful. You know, I think we need to do, you know, similar things in the future, but if they could be sort of more encompassing, and I'm pretty sure that's probably very difficult to accomplish, because it's probably driven by individual people and making sure that officers change what they're doing, which I appreciate is behaviour change and hard. But like I said, you know, I would back that. That's the end of all my questions. Be glad to hear.
Thank you. I'll feed that specific point back. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hack.
Thank you. I think just a couple of reflection points really is I think we as councillors have a responsibility, because colleagues are working from home, they are still working, and I think we do need to reiterate that, and I think that's important. In terms of the paper, I think obviously channel shifting is an important part of the financial reduction strategy. We know that we need to save money, and actually if we can ensure each value that a person has with a direct person within the authority is as valuable as possible, that overall does save money and hopefully saves time. The expectation would be, in terms of process restructuring, the reality that happens in the workflow in the customer contact centre anyway, because there's no way an advisor would have 400 bits of things of knowledge. So the workflows are happening anyway in the background. So in real time, if you're going through a channel shift and you're choosing to do a digital method or ringing, the process really is the same. You just have a human contact or not. I think channel shifts are really important as well. We live a 24/7 life. I think the expectation that you can report a pothole at 8 o'clock in the evening, I don't expect anybody to be working on Friday night at 8 o'clock in the evening, but I can report that pothole there and then when I see it. And I think that's those elements are really important. My question though is, are we seeing reduced demand because demand has reduced because people are fearful of that channel shifting? Are we seeing any of that filtering the numbers where we would expect demand to maybe stay steady? Are we actually seeing slight reductions? Is there any concern that people are not engaging in the digital method and therefore are abandoning the whole thing altogether? And I don't know, it's really difficult to look at failure demand, and I get that. Are we seeing channel shift, or are we seeing channel duplication? Are we seeing people actually report it online and then wait and not get a quick enough response and then ringing anyway? and I would be really interested to understand about channel duplication. And whilst I understand app technology, it is extraordinarily expensive to develop an app and keep it up to date. But I know other organisations such as Age Concern have been looking at playing with things like Alexa and Alexa process mapping, because obviously lots of people are talking to their Alexas because they're lonely, but they're going, is my bus on time today? And they can ask Alexa, and Alexa will say, actually your bus is, or your train is 10 minutes late or whatever. Are we looking at other forms of digital channeling? Because, you know, my dad really is not engaging in all of this, but he loves his Alexa because he talks to it all day long. And I think there is that kind of element of what technology are people using and what technology are people comfortable with using. And it's actually, how do we adjust our channel streaming to pick up those elements? Thank you. I mean, you know, these things are important. We need to save money. That's the reality, isn't it? And actually, if we can save money and make the process better, that to me is win-win. That's always what we're aiming for. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Sack. I'll bring Katie in on the specifics around the channel, but just a couple of points from me. The reason that we are so focused on customer segmentation is to understand which segments of the population will respond better to digital channels. So if I give you an example, when we released the waste booking system, this was during COVID, we didn't expect the level of adoption for that digital channel that we actually achieved, and it was about 96%, which meant that most people could get what they needed online and move on with their life and go and take their waste to the site. So it's those kind of segments that we're really trying to tap into first. So where there's a real appetite for ease of use, you're sat in your own home in your own time and you need to get something done. I'll let Katie come in on channel duplication, but the point about voice technology is something that we are really interested in. It's one of the reasons why we write our website for mobile optimization, because if you optimize it for mobile, it's very easy to take that leap into voice technology like Alexa. And we are actually, we've mentioned it in the paper, we are trialing some Microsoft technology that will provide sort of chat. It might be text chat, but it could translate to voice very easily. So yeah, that's definitely on the technology roadmap. But Katie, can you provide any insight into the duplication of channels?
Thanks, Jo. I think it's a really useful question, and certainly from what we found in the areas we've worked in, the answer is different depending on what you're looking at and how well the operations in the back office are working, as to whether you're seeing an overall demand reduction or whether you're just shifting where the demand's coming in to a cheaper channel, for example. So take the example of highways. When we look at the overall contact demand, that's not changed. In fact, it's gone up a bit, as you'd expect with sort of deteriorating roads or the floods and things like that. So we're not seeing demand reducing. Yes, there's a slight reduction in calls, but they're still finding a way in on the other channels. Whereas if I pick Blue Badge, we've halved the number of contacts in terms of calls, but the number of online self-serve options has gone up. But as a net demand it's a reduction overall. Every year we have 16,000 Blue Badge applications for renewals or new ones. Before we received a similar number of calls for every one of those applications, as well as people going online. Now some people are able to call us and then going online. So we're seeing an increase in online applications and a reduction of those that need to speak to somebody. So there is a net reduction, more in line with what you'd expect in terms of that contact level. School admissions, because the operations in the back office was so we're struggling last year, the volumes of people contacting us was far outweighed the number of applications that you would reasonably expect to see over that same period. So that reduction in demand is a genuine reduction because of the operations and the communications and managing expectations and being clear about timescales and process up front. So it totally depends on the area. So in some areas the demand is the demand because there's not much failure demand. In other areas it's because there are things we could put in place to actually help people understand what to expect and when.
You,
Mrs. Pride. Thank you. I'm a excuse me, a great user of CSC members. I probably make up a vast quantity because that way I've got a reference number. I know immediately it's been received, and normally
I then get it. This has been another one. This has been passed to such and such. So I am very fond of that, because also I sometimes feel I sit in another place as a councillor as well. If I go direct because I know an officer's name already placed in the department, I don't know, that person may have left, they may be on holiday, they're off sick, they've gone on a 6-month sabbatical, so I don't have the same knowledge that my reference numbers for it. And I think I would like to think I'm not different to any other councillor, but I had to report. I was raised by one of my residents via the florist that the ambulance bay outside the care home was faded and was not being used. Now that was on a Saturday afternoon. I could then immediately report that. I got an acknowledgement that it's been passed on to Highways with a reference number. Monday, I got one back saying the work has been logged and this is the reference number for the work. And within 6 days, that ambulance bay had been repainted. Now, okay, that may be an exception, but I think you do the very best you can. Now, I try to encourage, and I don't know whether you do get on them, I try to encourage my parish councils to use their thing, because otherwise they come to me to report it. The response comes to me, which I then respond to the parish council. What I feel, I don't know whether we can encourage it or do it, is sort of, if they've got a problem and they've gone to CSC, parish councils, if they copied in their local county councillor, we would know that that is done. Or I think we need to publicise. But on the whole, I think the statistics, and I like the report I get, particularly Highway, this has been done, that's been done, or not. So I do think as much as possible that we are kept informed. And I am reassured, and I would like to be continued, that if I have a resident that can't cope, that they can still get the help directly. It's a fast-moving thing. Youngsters like James,
thank you,
and others around the table are very computer literate. I'm not computer literate. I had to get one of my fellow councillors this morning to turn this on for me because it was frozen. But no, so I think the main thing is that, and can we be reassured that you are updating us, and if necessarily through the committee, I'm chair of Children and Families Scrutiny. So if it's affecting things, you're finding that certain things aren't working in that, but come to us first, and we can bring it then to the Scrutiny Commission. But I think if we could be reassured of that.
Mr. Barclay.
I think Mrs. Hack and Mrs. Fry have made some of the points I wanted to make. But I mean, it's an evolving thing. Some services are going to be more suited than others as you move along. I think it's reassuring. I mean, 28% of the population is not digitally enabled, which is a significant amount of people. So it's absolutely important that they are not excluded. And I think that point's been made. But I think it really would be useful to be kept updated on how it's going. And I think there's a huge volume of work and there's a huge volume of services. Not everyone is going to be suited to this, but there are operational things which probably will work extremely well. But there are other things where face-to-face contact is needed. But I just endorse what other members have said. I won't go on anymore.
Thank you. And Mrs. Pate.
Thank you. And again, I listened to everything and I'm in 3 minds about all of this. So on one side, I have got some negative comments and I've got some positive comments and I make lots of notes. So first of all, I think we need to be very mindful that councillors are the firewall. Officers sit in the back. The process is an ABC. A is councillors make policies. C is the outcome, and B is the operational side. And I think when you are coming with a report like this to councillors, it would be helpful, for instance, to have had more information, because sometimes people say they would like to see shorter reports, but this is a new thing. And for instance, your PowerPoint was maybe very informative, but I didn't have the time to digest it and to make comments on that. And I would have liked to, because going on for instance, your feedback. Now, there are different opinions. Everybody got a different opinion. I'll come back to CSC in a minute. But for instance, I get, as I said, we're the firewall. I get residents giving me feedback that is totally different to yours. I got fed up with pressing 1, 2, 3. I hung up. Why should I wait till the end for 10 minutes to leave feedback? And then they phone up and give me an earache, and you don't hear that side of it. You just look at the operational side from your point of view, and you really, that is one thing we need to address. Now, you said you want to drive out waste. Now, then, because our processes aren't very good, I do identify with that. But then the contradiction to me is self-service is to reduce customer contact. Now, you see, that shouldn't actually be like that. What it should be, it should enhance to lead to a better quality customer contact rather than saying, you know. So going back to it, there are flexibility issues and whatever else. Now, hang on. The CSC point I have to pick up. Now, yes, there are councillors who are very happy, but as a scrutiny commission, many councillors come to me and say, can you pick it up? There are inconsistencies. And I think Councillor Hill has picked it up. Now, personally, I've been down to CSC years ago. I have got no issues when I pick up the phones, and I find, because I have got a relationship, that it works for me. However, I have got parishes who come to me and say they do not get a response, and I'm chasing some responses. I have got an issue with, yes, I get an acknowledgement, but I don't know how long it has taken, where it's gone to. I haven't got an idea. Then I have to go through the whole process again, but the process doesn't work out my last weeks on the same issue to my new weeks. And then I get a new reference number, but they don't seem to match, and I'm starting all over again. Now, and then I get reference numbers. I'm a district and a county councillor, and I get loads and loads of casework, and I haven't got a clue what the reference number means. And so it would be a lot better to list it and identify it. Now, the other thing which I do know, it is that sometimes a CSC officer, they don't know it all. They have to pass it on to a subject-specific officer. But if they do not get the response in a timeline, CSC can't get back to me. So that needs to be addressed. And then there need to be, as I always say, there need to be a process, a protocol, and timelines, and maybe even flow charts that underpin it. So everybody knows what to do and sings off the same hymn sheet. And then there has to be members' involvement. So I know that, you know, officer on point B on the flow chart, and you know, so like I say, we have an overall view. Another thing on CSC, it is, and I've had it and I've got the evidence, it is automated response. We have a 3-meter deep pothole, and I get an awful lot of aggravation on every Facebook with the comments. Officers have inspected this and deemed that it doesn't warrant repair. Automated reply. You see, nobody inspected it and whatever else. So we have to be mindful of what we're saying in our automated reply. If that reply would have said what it says on the website, potholes will be deemed to be addressed in 90 days, I would not have gotten all of that earache. So I think there are lots of issues we can pick up and probably ask members where they have issues, and then we can feed that into the system. Now, let me just go back to my other points. We also, if you're looking at this, they're all very fine words, but what is missing for me, as I said, is processes, protocol, timelines, and, you know, the policies. And I'm sure that this report will come back, and I hope there will be a members briefing on this a little bit so all members know where we are going. But we also need to set out, and I know you're talking about that, but we need to set out quite clearly how we deal with people who have disabilities, who can't use modern technology, etc., etc. So again, we have got a clear, you know, guidelines on that. And for instance, Councillor Hack made a really good point in the previous report, because there was an issue where it said a certain thing, and then even when the officers looked at it, they couldn't download the paper copy. So I think whenever something goes online, it has to be rechecked and rechecked again in order to make sure that that is working. Now, and I think it needs also more case studies and diagnostics on the outcome to see if it actually is best value. Because this is one thing I'm not quite clear about. We're talking about AI, we're talking about all of that, but I do not know whether it's best value. And in the report, it says that the target is to deliver £110,000 in 24, increasing to 640,000. Well, that is ambitious, but on what are you basing it? Because if you're going later on in the report, you're talking about 4-year contracts with consultants and cost and cost and cost. So if I don't know what all of these costs are going to be, but if the ultimate aim is not only to have a quality service, and again, I feel you've got to be mindful that those taxpayers are our shareholders and pay our wages, and they need a quality service, not a reduced service. And also, if we keep reducing the services, then we might have to reduce staff, because if technology takes over and AI, we don't need all of the staff, do we? So what I'm trying to say is we need to have an evaluation whether the long-term cost is long-term sustainable in order to deliver the improvements. And my very, very last point on this, it is, whilst you give us the example on blue badges, and I see that that is working, I'm very, very reluctant to see how it can work in adult social care. For instance, I had a case where somebody phoned in October and it was in February, they were still waiting, and they contacted me. And so because of automation and what it was said, there was, and the person was sleeping on the settee in the lounge because there was no contact. Now, it might have been an isolated case, but it made me worry. So my plea on this is that when you are going, and you said several times, we decided, I think before you decide, you should go to the individual portfolio and cabinet members and probably speak to children, adult social care, and see what impact it has, and to pick up their brains and with the officers of that particular service, because I think, again, IT and the reality on the ground are a little bit different. And anyway, and I think Councillor Fryer said that if it comes to the individual scrutiny panels as well, it will be really good. So in a nutshell, I'd like to see a briefing. I'd like to see it to come back here, possibly overall strategically with cost. I like it to go to the individual scrutiny panels. And I said the other things I like to see: process, protocol, timelines and flow charts, so it makes it more understandable for us all, and so that we can buy into it and a little bit. And maybe you can also circulate your slides so we can all have a more in-depth look. And actually, thank you very much for all of the effort and the good work up to here. And it's a shame we didn't know earlier than at this point. Thank you.
Does anyone want to come back on that? I know, Mr. Brecken, did you want to speak?
I mean, I'm quite happy. I think the pilots that are in the paper clearly show it's across all departments. There's adults, there's children, there's highways, and we've done that. We've sort of worked on, I think, everything that's been done. It is a case of, there's an issue here, we need to solve it. So, I mean, headline is finances for local government are being pushed and we need to do more with less money. So that's the key. Members were aware of this because obviously we agreed the council strategy for 22-26 through council. So that was put in place. We highlighted these as savings under development in the 23-27 MTFS. So this was coming, and the work that's been done. I'm fairly certain that members have had a presentation on the blue badge through a members briefing. I think we gave examples of how that's changed. So I think we have done that. I mean, the key for me, corporate resources and everything that we do is back office. It's not frontline services. And if you have the savings we're looking to achieve this year and next year, which we need to achieve, because if we don't, we've got £750,000 worth of savings that we probably have to look at taking from other sort of frontline services, and that's something we don't want to do here. We didn't sign up for that. I think the whole thing, this is the first paper, this is the first off to scrutiny, and I think a lot of the examples that we've got can go through to the relevant scrutiny committees, and I think we can show good examples and good practice as we go along. And I think the officers, I thank sort of Joe, Darabella and Katie for their informative and I think honest presentation. The PowerPoints will be copied to members. But to me, there has to be an assurance that if a person wants to pick up a phone or write a letter to this council, it will have an open door for it to be received and then dealt with. I think what we're looking at is we're just trying to keep ahead of the changing times we live in. I mean, I'm in my 60s, and I remember in the 80s when I worked in robotics, we had the horrendous argument that a robot will replace a human. Well, yes, that's the idea, so the human can go and do something a bit more relevant rather than a very repetitive and monotonous job. And I remember using the old Vodafone brick as we had. They were pretty cool to walk around with, believe it or not, but they still exist. You can buy them on eBay, but that was change and people were against it. But I think if you come back 45 years sort of later on from those days, this is good work. It's proven work. It's proving to have changes. It is enhancing the services we offer. And I think really going forward, we just need to keep on informing members, and we'll do that certainly through this commission, but ideally through scrutiny committees as well. So I think I'll probably leave it at that, Chair.
Through you, Chairman, thank you for that, Mr. Brecken. And if I may come back, yes, councillors were aware of it, but councillors never saw the details because, as you just stated, it is the first report. And so I think it would have been nice to have seen it earlier. But you referred to the savings, and we've got to make those savings. Yes, that is noted too. But as I said when I spoke previously, we do not know the cost, and therefore we need to know to offset the long-term cost and the cost to implement this, whether the savings are actual savings or perceived savings. Thank you.
Quite happy to answer. I mean, the teams are in place to deliver these savings. I mean, the officers here today come from those teams, transformation units in place. I would say, I think the ways of working, the hybrid working system has been well discussed. I know, a couple of members have raised that, and I think the hybrid working, it's a different day, it's a different platform. I think it's a different committee that would come back with under the ways of working. So, but that is there, it's well monitored, and it certainly is very effective within this council. But I know other members have different views to that. But yeah, that's a different platform, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you, Declan. I hear that. But when I look at the next report, we're talking about the ways of working, which is going to be the Messiah, and it's saving us all of the work, but money. But then there are issues of slippage. You know, we haven't anticipated beforehand. So, you know, there is a little bit of give and take.
Thank you. Does any other member have any comments, questions on this item? Well, thank you for everyone coming today. Obviously, lots of people contact the council about lots of issues, and they need those issues taking up. Obviously, we're under huge financial pressure as a council, as we're going to find out again in the next item with the MTFS. The lack of funding means that it's very difficult for the council to deal with everything that it's contacted about. But the main thing is making sure that everyone gets that response and is included. And obviously we have a range of residents who want to be communicated with in different ways, and some people want personal contact and need to have the personal contact of talking to someone about their problem. But other people are much more comfortable about doing things online and don't actually want to talk to anyone about it, but just want to go ahead and sort out their issues. So we have to be flexible and try and save money and approach things in a pragmatic way. Thank you again for coming today and going through that with us. This moves us on to item 10, which is the medium-term financial strategy monitoring. Simone Hines, the Assistant Director, is introducing the report, supported by Director Declan Keegan, and Mr. Brecken's also remaining for this item. So when you're ready, please go ahead.
Thank you. So this report in front of you provides an update on the revenue and the capital budgets for the current financial year, as at the end of January, and projects that then outturn position through to the end of the year. If I just draw your attention firstly to section 8 of the report and the summary of the revenue budget there, which shows that we're currently forecast There we go. So the report at section 8 does show that we're currently forecasting an overall overspend of £3.2 million on the revenue budget for the year. That is an improved position from the period 6 position that Scrutiny last saw. At that point, we were forecasting a £10 million overspend. So that improvement has been across two main areas. So service budgets have shown an improvement of around £3 million overall since period 6. And then we've also had an improvement in terms of the cost of inflation since period 6 as well, of around £3 million. A key driver of that remaining overspend though continues to be social care, both adults and children's, and also transport. And children's particularly is still forecasting an overspend in the region of £12 million for the year. Those pressures across social care though are offset partly by savings elsewhere. We have had some savings in capital financing costs, increased investment income as well because of higher interest rates obviously at the moment. And we're also seeing, particularly in the second half of the year, quite a lot of vacancy savings coming through as well, which I think is an indication of some general recruitment and retention difficulties actually, as well as possibly some impact of the spend controls that we implemented just before Christmas as well, though it's difficult to determine an impact of those precisely yet. So just in terms of children's and families, a little bit more detail, the £12 million overspend that we're currently forecasting continues to be as a result of sort of complexity and cost of placements in children's social care, and also increased demand from unaccompanied asylum seeking children. The actual demand in terms of the number of children that we're providing a service for is actually fairly static. It is the cost of providing that service that's the issue, and there is more information covered in the report. And then just, I guess, to give you a little bit of assurance that there is a range of transformation work streams currently in process at the moment, which is aiming to reduce the demand and the cost of children's social services or social care. And we are working in partnership with Bernardo's to do that as well. And there are some quite challenging targets in the MTFS to reduce the cost of children's social care demand in the future. There is also still an overspend forecast on the dedicated schools grant. Again, a reduced overspend compared to the previous position. I think in period 6 we reported a forecast overspend of around 12 million. That has now reduced to 8.5 million, although some of that is an underspend on schools and early years. The main driver of the overspend continues to be the high needs block and provision of SEND services. But again, we have got various transformation projects ongoing, and the transformation in SEND in Leicestershire project is now in implementation phase. So we should start to see some of those improvements as we go through the next few months. There are also some demand and cost challenges in adult social care as well as children's, and there's quite a lot of information given in the report. There are some charts at section 27, and you can actually see there that although we've had a significant increase in demand and cost in adult social care over the last 12 months or so, there are some early signs that demand may be starting to sort of level out a little bit. Again, it's quite early days, so I don't want to draw too many conclusions from that, but there are quite a lot of demand management activities ongoing in adult social care. So it's looking like that is now starting to have an impact in terms of that demand. And then just briefly on environment and transport, again, there is still a forecast overspend on both school and social care transport, but there are some underspends elsewhere in the service that are mitigating that, largely due to increased income actually across environment and waste. So taking all that together, we get the forecast overspend overall of 3.2 million, but that does mean that overspend is within the realms of the MTFS risk contingency, so it can be managed within that contingency without the need to call on reserves for this year, which I think the last time we reported the position here, we were above that level of the risk contingency, so we're potentially needing to look at reserves. Just to highlight though, there are some additional flooding costs that may be, we are anticipating needing to incur. They are probably going to be incurred next financial year when the weather gets a bit better. So there's only a small amount of those costs included in this position, but we are expecting them to be in the region of about £1 million. So the outturn position we'll need to look at how we take those into account at the end of the year and provide for them perhaps in 24-25. There is still some of the inflation contingency still to be allocated though, so it may be that we look to prioritise that inflation contingency balance towards those flooding works at year end. But just move on then to the capital programme.
If that's okay, yeah. Do you want to come in with a...
Yes, please, Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I think the officers should be congratulated on
getting the deficit down, because when we think it's total revenue, spend £500 million, we've now got that down to 3 million. I think that, you know, notwithstanding the wider problems we've got going forward, to have got that down with the actions that have been taken, and I know that officers at the last meeting reported various things that were being done to put expenditure controls in place. I think, you know, we should acknowledge that is a good news story and a much greater story which we all know about. But it is the case that the cost pressures in children's, particularly adult social care and transport, are continuing unabated. And there's been a number of programmes on the radio recently looking at these services across. There was a particular, they call it the briefing room or something, which looked at this, and this isn't just happening in Leicestershire, it's happening across. It's these services that are really getting more and more expensive, and they were looking at, you know, what could be done, and in all cases it would require action at national level and not at local level to change that, or to help local authorities with some of these costs and procurement. The children in care, that, you know, that is just a sad story, that more and more children are needing these high levels of care. Of course, in the old days, you know, we operated children homes directly. I'm not saying we want to go back to that, because they weren't always happy places, but you just wonder that, you know, there's money being made out of this, no doubt about it. And particularly, I think, for older children, 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, and so on. And there's a lot of criticism about the actual support that is provided to them as against the money that's been claimed. And like we've done in other areas, we've gone back into, haven't we, providing accommodation. We don't operate it, but we own accommodation for old people, to help to keep those hotel costs down. I just wondered if we are looking at this for children in an effort to try and get some of those costs under control going forward. I think that is really worrying. I know we're working with Bernardo's. Maybe they could help deliver more related in-house solutions, but the weekly costs there are really worrying going forward, as are the transport costs going up. Do you want to deal with the business rates? Could you just clarify paragraph 61, paragraph 62? We talk about the business rates. I'm a bit confused about that. You say it's 12, we've got additional 12 million in business rates coming in. Let's find the paragraph 61. Additional business rate income, 12 million. Sorry, 61 I'm referring to, yeah. And then at 62, additional business rate income of 5.3 is forecast in 23-24. So are we saying that the 12 million is coming in over a longer period of time, as against the 5 million additional that's come in this particular year? Because that does look quite healthy, that there's more business rates coming in, and then you've got the money coming into the pool, although I appreciate that is more about being spent on projects that used to be carried out by the LEP, as opposed to being able to help our budget process. So could we just have some clarity around those two paragraphs, please? Thank you.
All right, deal with the business rates question first. So the additional business rates income in total is the £12 million, and that's a combination of growth in our business rates, the amount that the districts collect on our behalf is more than we'd included in the budget, and that's because we do take quite a prudent approach when we're setting the business rates budget, because it is very volatile and quite difficult to predict, and we're also reliant on working with our districts on that as well. And then there's also the amount that we then retain extra because we're part of the business rates pool. So that £12 million is made up of two elements. Firstly, growth in the business rates base, and secondly, the amount then that we're able to retain extra because we're part of that pool. That second part is particularly as part of the agreement with the pool, we are we spend that or prioritise that on economic growth activities. And I think in the past it's largely been spent on sort of capital projects that then help economic development. So that paragraph 62 where it refers to the 12 million, that is 23-24 income from those two sort of different elements, both related to business rates.
Okay, thank you. So what the 12 million in 61, that's not just this year. Hopefully that will continue. Those businesses have started paying additional business rates. I believe a lot of that comes from Harborough, because Harborough's done particularly well with business rates, mainly due to new sheds at Mrs. Page's end of the district. But presumably this is going to continue. So what I'm trying to understand is, can we rely on that 12 million going forward? Is that going to help the deficit?
Well, there's a couple of issues with that. Firstly, the business rate system is due to have a reset. It was well overdue a reset actually, but because of other government priorities, it's been delayed. So at some point in the future, all authorities will have their business rates baselines reset, and any growth that we've built up since 2013, I think it is, will potentially be lost as we'll go back to our baseline and we'll start again. And now we don't know for sure when that business rates reset will happen. The government did confirm that it wouldn't be before 25-26, but we don't know sort of what will happen beyond that. And we also don't know how that reset will be done. It could be that we go back almost to the baseline that we had originally and have to sort of start again. It could be that there'll be a partial reset, so we could keep some of that growth for longer, or there could be something completely different. I also think there will probably need to be some transitional arrangements, because it is quite a large amount of growth that's been built up, not just by Leicestershire, but across local government. So to take that business rates growth away in one go would have a huge impact, and of course it may well be reallocated in other ways as well. So it's for that reason it's not guaranteed indefinitely, because we don't know what will happen with the business rate system in the future. And similarly with business rates, the pool growth, we again don't know what future government policy might be around business rates pools, whether they'll continue and whether they'd be on the same terms as we've currently got. So I guess the short answer is in that way it's not guaranteed because of government policy. And then as I mentioned earlier, business rates income is volatile by its nature. So if we've got empty properties, for instance, we can have a reduction in income there, and businesses can also appeal against the rateable value and the amount of businesses, the amount of rates they have to pay. So that can also cause income to fluctuate. But that said, where there's business rates growth and we've got new builds coming on, that should also increase business rates income in future years. So, and that's really why we take this approach in the MTFS with business rates, that we don't build it all into our base position, because it is so volatile and there is that uncertainty.
Through you, Chairman, I'm a little bit confused. Sorry, could you just clarify for me? So, as Simon just said, these are like income streams, and also being district councillors, we know that there is a forecast of, for instance, my ward, Magna Park, growing. So we are anticipating a steady, over the MTFs, a steady growth of that. So are you saying that, and we are working it all into our MTFSs, so are you saying that if the government rejigs, we could actually see less of an income of the rates we are now working on and anticipating? Question one. Question two, on what Simon just said, we are talking about the pools, because we all as authority agreed on being in that pool to ensure that we get that. Could that be affected? And well, obviously to the negative. And when could we see that anticipation? Because then we really all, even in the district, would have to rejig our MTFs, won't we? And the last thing, Simon, going back on it, we're talking, and congratulations on the reduction of the overspend, but how sustainable is that? I know these things more, demand, and it might go up again, but at the moment, how do you think, how sustainable is that underspend?
Thank you. So in terms of business rates, yes, I think that the response is there is a lot of uncertainty about future business rates growth, and certainly in our MTFS from 25-26, we have built in some reductions in growth because we're anticipating a reset. Now, I think, with the timing of a general election this year, it may well be that reset just practically can't happen in 25-26, and we may well be looking at 26-27 onwards. But up to now, the government have been clear that a reset is part of the business rate system. A reset of growth was always intended, and I think we're 3 or 4 years past when the original reset date was. But again, that could be subject to change. It could be that the reset doesn't happen, that it's not a full reset, that we get to keep some of the growth and only lose part of it. Pools could well continue in their current form. Equally, they could. There are some pilots ongoing at the moment and have been for a number of years where some areas actually keep more business rates than others, and the government was supposed to be sort of learning from those pilots to inform future business rates policy. So I think until we get into sort of the next Parliament and the next spending review, business rates growth is going to be very uncertain.
So through your chairman, so what you're saying is treat all of that with extreme caution going forward.
I think certainly growth above baselines, definitely. So all authorities have a business rates baseline, and that part of the income is relatively guaranteed, although if your business rates falls quite a lot, you could go below that baseline. It's your position above the baseline that is certainly sort of the risk that we need to take into account.
Thank you. Any more questions, comments? Oh, sorry.
So I think there was a second point around the yeah. So just to be clear, we are still at the moment certainly our service expenditure is still an overspend compared to the current budget, and there are underlying sort of structural issues certainly in terms of social care. So the children's services position is an overspend of £12 million for the year. Still, it's just as then underspends elsewhere that's helping that. So I think the challenge absolutely long term is still around that social care spend, and we've had some additional income this year. Investment income obviously has helped, and we've been looking at our capital finance, and that's helped to offset the cost, but there is still that sort of underlying issue around social care.
Else have any questions, comments at this point? No? Do you want to carry on, please, Simone?
Just move on to the capital section then. So in terms of the capital forecast, the report currently forecasts slippage on the capital programme of just under 19 million for the year. That's about 14% of the capital budget. The main variances relate to school places programmes. There's been some slippage in some of those programmes, some vehicle replacement slippage, and a number of highways related schemes where the projects have had sort of slightly delayed start times or the procurement's taken slightly longer. But you can see the detail of those projects at paragraph 76. Just to flag up there, despite the slippage across some projects in the year, there are some early indications that the MMDR North project may exceed its original estimated cost. Now, there is a contingency or a corporate contingency in place, and we're still in the realms of the contingency. And that amount is still being confirmed, so we will give a further update in the outturn report. But for that reason, because of that potential increased spend on the MMDR project, we are suggesting that any remaining risk contingency or inflation contingency after funding the flooding costs will then go towards the capital programme, so that we can make sure we've got sufficient funding for some of those schemes in the future. That's all I was going to highlight on the capital programme. And I guess probably reiterating what I've already said, but just in summary, kind of the revenue budget, although it is showing an improved position, there are absolutely some underlying sort of structural issues, particularly in social care, that means we will still need to have that absolute focus on demand management, particularly as we go through the next few months.
Mrs. Fryer.
I'm looking at under item on page 63. I'm looking at the favourite one, and I've only been a councillor here for coming up to 9 years, and no, not that long, anyway, for some years, the Zosh Bridge replacement. I seem to remember that a few years ago it was about 2 million and this, that and the other, and it's gone on. But I noticed that the tendering process is to commence soon and the award of the contract early 2024. So is that still online, and when is early 2024? We're now halfway through March, and I really do not want to see this again another year, and I really can't understand how it's taken so long for something so simple, to my mind. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You'll be pleased to hear then that the tendering process has completed, and we are almost at the end of the evaluation process as well, and on the verge of being able to award that contract.
Good. Mrs. Page.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions, please. Now, one, it is it me, or are items, whether it's slippage, are they increasing? So talk me around it, because surely when all of these things are set in place in the first place, do we allow for some slippage? How do we, are there more nowadays? And why have we got so many? And do we allow for slippage when we set these items? Because if I can go back to the point I made earlier, the workplace strategy, which was supposed to be the saving messiah, and now we're having all of these items of slippage, and it's costing us more than we anticipated. So I'm not sure whether it was worth it in the first place, or whether we made the savings we were hoping for. So just talk me around the slippage. And then just a general silly question, because I didn't know. When I was Googling yesterday, and I know we keep talking about SEND and the increased cost of SEND, and yesterday Googling, I read that Birmingham stopped all of the SEND for children over 16 because it is not mandatory to provide transport for anybody over 16. So do we provide transport for people over 16? And just explain that one to me. And I think that is all my questions on this. And while I'm talking, can I say again, I love your reports, because they're written in such a manner that I can understand it, and I find them a real valuable Bible. Can I come back on that, please, Declan? Because that sounds a very logical explanation, but when I'm reading this here, it looks like a negative. So maybe we should reflect that in future reports, because the way you're putting it forward, it's not necessarily a negative. So do you know what I'm trying to say? Thank you. Sent over 16.
Right.
So I'm just going to pick up because I've been working on one of these cases that Declan's alluding to. I understand that the 16 to 18, because of the RAPA, the raising of participation age, children with EHCPs go to special provision schools. I think it's within the gift of the school to decide from their EHCP whether their personal budget will actually cover the transport costs for learners of 16 to 18. But the two different schools that I've been speaking to have had two different stories from both of them. So there is consistency, dare I say, in the anomaly. There's an oxymoron for a Wednesday afternoon. Hyman, did you have your hand up?
Brief question on the increased costs on Melton Road. How do we do contracts then these days? I mean, why isn't the contractor picking up? As a small business, if I give someone a price to do a job and then it takes me an extra day to do it, that's my problem. So are we transferring as much of this risk when we let these contracts to people who build roads?
Frisbee. Thank you. Just a follow-on from Councillor Galton there. Obviously, it's a close to home subject for the MMDR for myself. I understand that there is going to be a release of cash from the delayed, postponed or cancelled section of the Northern HS2 rail track. Is that being taken into consideration, or has there been any decisions made around that?
So the recently announced funding for the local transport fund, we still haven't had any detailed allocations or grant conditions yet. So we know it's our total amount is, I think it's 238 million over a 7-year period. We're expecting it to be backloaded because that's how the HS2 funding was, but we haven't had any phasing information yet. And with some of the previous transport and highways funding, there were some conditions around it, around additionalities that had to be spent on new items rather than anything that was already in the sort of council's expenditure plans, if you like. So until we've got some information on the actual funding profile and the conditions, it's hard to plan ahead. And it also doesn't kick in until 25-26 as well, so the funding won't be available until the following financial year.
Does anyone else have any other? Mr. Brecken.
Just on that, really, members did have a briefing note, which was quite informative. So I think our guidance is once the guidance comes out by the end of March, we're expecting it. So and then we're going to start developing the note. I'm reading from the note. It was develop priority projects for delivery for a short-term 2-year plan once guidance and annual allocations are received. So, and I think it will be consulting stakeholders. MPs have certainly, we've had correspondence in from the MPs for various projects to say, please consider this, and they will be part of that consideration, as will all of the local sort of bodies. And we'll compile the list and we'll see. But obviously, at the end of the day, we'll still need to have the money. And if there's a change of government, then obviously that may not happen. So it's, but I think the briefing note members had, there is also going to be an all-member briefing as well. It goes to a cabinet report in March and then all-member briefing in April. So hopefully that'll shed a bit more light on the practicalities. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brecken. Any other Mrs. Hack?
It was just a really quick one in terms of the relationship between capital and revenue expenditure, and whether or not any of the capital slippage items will have an impact on revenue expenditure, either delaying it or bringing it forward. And I didn't know if there was any of those elements that we needed to think through.
I'm not aware of any implications in that way. Certainly not been made aware of them, and certainly in terms of the capital spend, as we've highlighted earlier, we do pass on as much of the risk on to contractors, and we are then, we do have fixed contracts in place. So I'm not aware of any revenue implications, but it is something that we would consider as part of the monitoring process.
Just one more question. I forgot about that. Page 65, on the top, that was point 82, and it talks about the Investing in Leicestershire programme, and it explains the net income return. However, could you explain, I know in the figures it is slightly up on some, but is that an increase in percentage term to previous? And then the top, it said investments were made totaling 23.7, comprising bank risk sharing and 8 into pooled infrastructure fund. Could you talk us around that one, please? Because I can't get my head around it. Don't know what you're talking about.
Does this microphone work? Okay, sorry about that. So if I go reverse order, so pooled infrastructure fund is basically just a fund that you're buying with a specific manager, and the one we've got is JP Morgan. So they'll invest in a range of things, wind farms, transport infrastructure, sort of waste treatment work. So it's just a whole range of things. And the reason we did that was just because it's a pretty kind of solid investment type, where it tends to kind of be all weather. It doesn't tend to be too reactive to kind of the external economy the way they've got it set up. So it's kind of quite a nice one that, if you've seen what's happened with property values, in truth, it can happen with infrastructure as well, but it's a relatively stable one, fairly sort of steady returns that come back. So that's what we mean by pooled infrastructure. It's just a manager who's been appointed to find those kind of sort of like the infrastructure that we see all users, as it were. Pooled bank risk share is a bit more kind of niche. It's not sort of one that you'll probably come across in your normal sort of, if you do any sort of personal investing. And basically what it is there's banks have to hold a certain level of kind of capital to act as buffers against kind of shocks, and this kind of got a lot of play after the sort of the global financial crisis. But holding capital is really, really expensive for banks. They don't like to do it. It reduces the profit. It's really expensive to hold that sort of equity. So there's companies that kind of got formed, these financial companies that basically insure some of the risks or the losses that banks could incur, and that's what the pooled bank risk share is. So we've got it's a company that sort of were appointed by the pension funds, and they've got sort of a really good sort of standing in the market, but they basically just analyse the loans that the bank takes on, agree to insure a certain amount. It means the banks hold less capital, but the company that we sort of employ gets a share of those insurance premiums. So again, when the pension fund appraised it, it's one that we sort of just jumped on the back of, because the stability and the sort of track record looked very good. It looked to operate in a very different way to property. So they're the kind of two, and it's just examples of diversify. So it's not about local Leicestershire property, but it just gives us stability in those investment returns, make it a bit more predictable overall.
Through you, Chairman, through going back to the table where it is listed at the bottom, pooled infrastructure and bank shares, and it is showing forecasting return only 2.8 and 4.4%, because above them some are higher. Does that already include the investment you are listing in 8.2, or will that be profit going forward?
The 8.2 is the 23 million, so some of those two. So the 4.4 and the 2.8 is what they've earned in the current year. And what's fairly typical, particularly sort of you see it on the bank risk share and the column to the right where it goes up to 8.5, is those early years when they're first deploying money, you're incurring a lot of the cost of sort of those investments. So you tend to start off quite low returns, but then over the sort of the period of the investment, which is like sort of 5-6 years, it gradually gets higher and higher because you're just sort of reaping the benefits. So early on, you get all the costs, some of the losses are booked as well, but then in later years, it's just sort of tends to be sort of pure cash coming back. So the 2.8 is what we're earning this year, but the 8.5 is what we expect to earn over the full term.
Thank you very much.
Does any other members have any other comments, questions? No? Okay. Mr. Bracken.
Just really to thank Simone and Declan for their clear and concise reports today, and also I hope members appreciated the budget summary that the members sent out, just to give you a good feel of what's out there and sort of what help or no help that we get as a local authority. So thank you, Chair.
So thank you, Simone and Declan and Mr. Bracken and every member who's made contributions and asked questions today. That's the end of the meeting. The next meeting of the Commission will take place on Wednesday, the 10th of April, 2024 at 10 a.m. Item 11, as advised, there's no urgent items, so it brings the meeting to a close. Thank you and good afternoon, everyone.